In the face of the many COVID-19 challenges confronting civil society and international aviation, the world looked to the ICAO Council to provide the high-level guidance which governments and the industry need today to begin restart international transport and recovering from COVID-19. We answered this call yesterday with the delivery and adoption of this report and with recommendations that take off guidelines which will allow member states and industry to implement harmonized risk mitigation measures in full accordance with the latest and most prudent medical and traveler health advice available to us. The report has the objective to establish connectivity, protecting passengers and preventing at the same time, of course, further spread out of COVID-19. International transport is a fundamental component of a modern society, and its smooth and safe restart is essential for the recovery of the global economy. ICAO is committed to the transport's restart as it has been to assuring its safe, secure, and sustainable development for more than 75 years. Our Council Task Force has done an incredible job bringing together the WHO, many other international organizations, and the aviation industry to realize this plan and guidelines for the global restart of international air transport. And we are very pleased today having the opportunity to discuss with you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your participation. Thank you very much for the interest in this press conference. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mr. President. We'll now hear from ICAO Secretary General, Dr. Fang Liu. Dr. Liu.
Thank you, Anthony. Media friends, good morning and good afternoon. Addressing and mitigating the effects of COVID-19 has led to significant restrictions on the global movement of people and goods. It has led to more and more areas of the world having to deal with levels of social and economic isolation, which are both extensive and unprecedented. ICAO took immediate and coordinated action on COVID-19 as soon as it was identified as a public health emergency of international concern by the WHO. We've been very active throughout this period on numerous fronts relating to public health, operational safety measures, maintaining critical air cargo supply chain globally, the expediting of humanitarian and repatriation flights, and other urgent priorities. The development of these new CAT guidelines has required extensive support from the ICAO Secretariat, and implementation them globally is now the major task ahead of us. But fortunately, we have practiced over the last 75 years since this organization established at standardizing the international aviation system, one of the humanity's most complex and cooperative achievements. Restoring public confidence in air travel has very broad benefits. I think it's important that we recall that this isn't only about operational and economic viability of the air transport sector, but of entire societies and regions having their economic livelihoods and stability restored. ICAO has been proud to fulfill this important multilateral role during this challenging time, and we will continue to work hard to ensure a safe and harmonized COVID-19 recovery for global air transport. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Dr. Liu. Could we now hear from the CART chairman, Mr. Philippe Bertoux of France, please?
Merci, good morning, bonjour. The guidance produced in a bit less than 5 weeks by the Council Aviation Recovery Task Force, which I had the pleasure to chair, is a series of technical recommendations. But this guidance has great value because it has been produced by the most representative group ever gathered for such a challenging task. The CART brought together states from all continents, as well as regional organizations and industry. And together we devised a common platform to align and to harmonize our efforts towards the restart and recovery of international air travel. It is also worth underlining that the CART guidance is a joint effort by ICAO and WHO. It brings together the aviation sector and the health sector. And therefore, the recommendations annexed carry even more value for all stakeholders. We must realize that it is the first time since the onset of the COVID-19 crisis that such guidance is produced at a global level. Of course, it will have to be revised and updated. The CART guidance is a living document which will evolve as more scientific evidence becomes available and in view of the experience acquired when applying the recommended measures. As representative of France and as very attached to the United Nations spirit and values, I am extremely satisfied that the International Civil Aviation Organization, 75 years after its creation, has proven again that it is an irreplaceable forum for effective multilateralism. Thank you. Merci.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bertoux. Could we now hear, please, from the IATA Director General, Mr. Alexandre de Juniac? Alexandre, are you with us?
He's muted. Sorry.
There we go.
So, yes, thank you very much. First of all, I would like to say that this document is a tremendous work and tremendous success because it is the key to unlock air travel, to restore passenger confidence and air worker confidence, and to gather government acceptance to lift travel restrictions and open borders. I have 3 comments on that. First of all, I would like to emphasize the speed and unity of the effort to publish this report, and particularly the takeoff document. It should give the world great confidence that air transport sector will restart responsibly by keeping the safety of passengers and transport workers as the top priority. Governments, health authorities, and the industry, under the responsibility of ICAO and the contribution of WHO, contributed the best advice of global experts to produce the takeoff guidelines. And these are fully supported by all the players who connect the world. The second point that I want to highlight is the need to implement fast. As the Secretary General mentioned before, countries are restarting or ramping up domestic operations, and many are preparing to open their borders. So these guidelines need to be in place quickly so that we can safely meet the demands of those who need to travel when it's possible to do so. Third comment is that the implementation needs to be harmonized. Over many decades, we have proven that this approach makes flying safe. We need to implement the takeoff guidelines in the same way. And the alternative of an uncoordinated implementation is simply not thinkable, not acceptable. So harmonization, collaboration, coordination are the key words. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Alexandre. May we now please hear from you, Angela, from ACI World?
Thank you. Good morning. Good afternoon to all. ACI welcomes the authoritative ICAO Council Aviation Recovery Task Force report, which will contribute to a globally consistent, outcome-based approach to the restart and recovery of air travel. Aviation is an interconnected and interdependent global ecosystem, so it is significant that ICAO, states, and industry have worked together to develop these sector-wide recovery recommendations. This kind of collaboration, cooperation, and consistency will remain key. First, for the industry to successfully restart, and then for sustaining a balanced recovery from the unprecedented global challenge posed by COVID-19. The takeoff guidance for air travel through the COVID-19 public health crisis recommendations will inform, align, and progress the local, national, and regional recovery plans that are now being implemented around the world. This represents the most effective way of combining risk mitigation with the need to unlock economies and to enable travel. ACI has participated in the CART. We will continue to work with our global partners to achieve rational harmonization of measures, processes, and procedures that are introduced as a result of COVID-19, and the work of CART and this report will help to bring this harmonization. It's in the best interest of all of us to minimize the opportunities for spread of the disease while restarting aviation operations to restart the world's economies. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Angela. We're going to begin with some questions now. I'm looking over some of them, and I just wanted to recall that we would like you to identify yourself and your news outlet when you send in your questions, and also try and identify who you would like the respondent to be if you have somebody specific. We have two questions here from Danny Lee, and these are dealing mainly with the quarantine restrictions on air travel. Danny notes that Hong Kong today announced an extension on quarantine measures for 3 more months until September 18th, and wonders what impact this would have on air travel's recovery. He also asked that with the CART report, how much more time would you estimate people would need to spend at the airport pre-departure? Angela, how about you speak to that first question about the time estimated for people to spend at the airport pre-departure? Sorry, you're muted, Angela, just a moment. There you go, sorry.
A lot of that is going to depend on the volume at the airport and the layout at the airport. In a large airport with low volume, there should not be much more time needed for the passenger to come to the airport to keep the physical distancing and other requirements. In a smaller airport or an airport that has peaking, I would say that it's going to be in another hour to even 2 hours for the passengers to come to the airport. It's very important that these measures take account of the changes in volume. Some of these things are not sustainable as volume increases at a particular airport. And that volume depends on the peaking characteristics and the layout of the airport.
Thank you, Angela. Danny, I also wanted to mention that specific questions that would be more appropriate, for instance, for an aviation medical specialist or an aviation safety specialist. I'm noting here that a few questions are coming in that are of a specifically technical nature. Those should be instead sent in by writing to either any of the organizations or the appropriate organizations included in this press conference, so that they could deal with those with their internal experts. The leaders are here today to talk about the guidelines, their development, how they're going to align actions around the world. But the leaders here today won't be able to ask specific technical questions relating to medical approaches, medical decisions, etc. These are incremental decisions being made day by day, of course, along with everybody else in the world. We'll go. There's another question here, for instance, from Kiersey, and she's asking how much more expensive flight tickets will be. And of course, our leaders can't answer questions like that. That'll be up to every airline in the world, and be very specific to local situations. There will be different local situations in different countries. The guidelines are intended to align aviation's response to those. So if we could please try and avoid specific questions like that, that would be appreciated. Our next question comes from Tom Ballantyne. He's saying that these are guidelines, but they're not mandatory. How confident are you that all members of ICAO will impose these guidelines? We've already seen, issues and rules, including separation within the aircraft cabin with some exceptions. How can we be confident of coordinated imposition on these guidelines? Mr. President, could I ask you to answer that first on behalf of ICAO, and then I'd like also perhaps our IATA and ACI colleagues to join in too on that if they could.
Yes, sure, Tony. Yes, these guidelines are not mandatory, are not corresponding to the SARPs, the standards that are mandatory for member states. But guidelines are very important to harmonize measures that are taken by member states. And let's remind that ICAO is composed by member states. The council that yesterday adopted the report is composed by 36 representatives of 36 member states. So in this sense, I'm very much confident that the guidelines will be implemented. What is more important is to support the implementation of guidelines with some tutorials, some support in terms of understanding the implementation of our guidelines. But I'm very, very much confident that the guidelines will be adopted and implemented by all states.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Alexandre, would you have anything to add to that?
Yes, I think that we can contribute to the implementation of the guidelines. First of all, by asking our members, of course, to put them in force and to respect these guidelines everywhere in the world. So it will be a strong push, and also by discussing together with ICAO to government to support, to develop, to even to have anything to explain or to train people to implement these guidelines. So we will contribute heavily, because we think it's absolutely key that these harmonized measures are quickly and uniformly, or most possible uniformly implemented. So we'll do our job through our members and directly by talking to governments.
Thank you very much, Alexandre. Angela, would you have anything you'd like to add to this as well?
You have me on mute. ACI has already sent to our members specific guidelines going into more detail aligned with the ICAO document for the airports to implement. We will also now send the CART recommendations so that they can send them and discuss them with their states so that there will be this harmonization. The advantage is to airports as well as states to have this harmonization so that passengers know what to expect.
Thanks very much, Angela. We have a question from Marissa Garcia at Forbes.com. She's wondering what audit of general preparedness around the world has been conducted to gauge the ability to implement new health and safety measures at various airlines and airports. She notes, for example, that the availability of hands-off check-in bag drop systems, CTR scanners at security, health check support available, etc. Will there be some method of tracking preparedness and rate of implementation of new procedures and ratings at airlines accordingly? Is there anybody here who would like to answer that one first? Perhaps Alexandre or Angela? It's more airline and airport specific.
I can start. If you want, we have prepared a kind of quote-unquote certification process and auditing process to see whether or not, the airlines, and potentially we will do that with the airports, are ready or are implementing properly, the guidelines. So we will have that in our audit kit that could be available to see whether we are prepared, what has to be done, what improvement should be implemented.
Very good. Thanks very much, Ms. Alexandre. Dr. Liu from ICAO, could I ask you about whether ICAO will be undertaking any monitoring, etc., of the guidelines as they're being implemented? Is that something which is foreseen right now?
Thank you, Anthony. Certainly, as I indicated in my statement, now the CAT report is issued, and the task ahead of us is to implement these recommendations at the global level and at the regional level. ICAO has been developing the implementation plan for CAT report, and through the regional approaches and also through the international cooperation and partnership with the UN organizations like WHO, UNWTO, and other international regional organizations in the travel and also tourism, and also in other areas, and also, of course, with our industry partners like IATA, ACI, and others. So the most important thing is we want to make our assistance to the member states, which are really vulnerable and do not have expertise, to help them to go through this process and to build their capacity to implement these recommendations. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Dr. Liu. I'd like to direct the next question to CART Chairman, Mr. Bertoux. Karen Walker at Air Transport World asks, this is described as a living document. How often will the measures be reviewed and by whom? Phillippe?
Yes, thank you, Anthony. The CART itself is a body that will continue beyond its which was to produce the report. And certainly it will play a role of oversight on how the guiding recommendations will be implemented. There will be a follow-up. The report itself includes the creation of a database within ICAO to report experience, best practices. And so this will also serve as a platform to refine regularly the guidelines. So I would expect that the similar kind of grouping with ICAO experts and industry experts will regularly meet to see and update the guidelines and republish them regularly. Also, I am sure that CAPSCA will play an important role in this regard too. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I'd like to direct the next question to both the President of the Council and also to the CART Chairperson. Concerns the amount of international consensus there is around these guidelines right now. Marissa Garcia, again from Forbes.com, asks, what government states so far have lent their support to these guidelines? May we start with the President of the Council, please?
Sure, thank you. Thank you very much. Well, this report has been developed and produced with the support of states, not only because it was composed the task force by council members, but also because the task force included a representative from regional organizations, and the regional organizations represent member states at the regional level. So once that the member states have already contributed the development and then the approval of the report, I'm quite confident that the support for the implementation will be done. I can add also that I've received several requests of, let's say, availabilities to support the regional level from member states to support the implementation of the report, because the harmonized restarting aviation is a very sensitive issue for many, many member states. So I'm very much confident that the government states will support the implementation of this report.
Thanks very much, Mr. President. Phillippe, did you wish to speak to that at all, or did he cover the points you thought?
Yes, of course, I completely agree with the President. I should say also that the composition of the CART and its representativity is also a good indication of the level of support that we got from the states and the regional organizations. It has been a two-way street. I want to emphasize that also, because as we were working on the CART recommendations, some key players were also preparing their own guidelines, their own recommendations, and they were informed also by the other colleagues in the CART, through the CART, and they were also able to adjust their own guidelines. So I think it's been mutually profitable, and as in itself, the process in itself has been virtuous and produced already a good alignment. Thank you.
Thank you, Philippe. Our next question comes from Kirsi Hitainen again from the Finnish Lanen Media. We'll direct this to Monsieur de Juniac from IATA, please, as it's airline related. She's wondering if would it not be more assuring from aviation companies to guarantee a safe flight by making sure there's a free seat beside every passenger? She notes that SARS spread through airplane air conditioning. How can we be sure that that's not going to be the case with COVID-19 as well? Alexandre?
It's a very good question. The purpose of the guidelines that have been issued by the CART people is to provide a safe process to minimize the risk of transmission of virus on board and the transmission of virus between country A, and country B, country of departure and country of arrival. And what we say is that implementing this process minimizes the risk, and it creates or it doesn't impose to neutralize seats on board, provided we strictly comply with the process that has been recommended. For instance, temperature control, mandatory wear of masks, etc. And we have explained also that for economic reasons, neutralizing seats would lead either not to fly for airlines or to increase prices by at least 45 to 100%, depending on the configuration and the aircraft. So that the reason why we think that the right compromise is to have reasonable economic conditions and absolutely safe processes to guarantee the safety of our passengers and of our air workers. That's the reason why. Yeah.
Thank you, Alexandre. Well, everybody, I'd like to let you know we don't have any more questions in the queue. So if there won't be any more questions, we will be closing the press conference now. I'd like to encourage any follow-ups, especially of a technical nature, to be sent directly to the organizations concerned. And also, if you have any specific questions for any specific leaders that you would like to follow up with, please direct those for ICAO to myself and William Ryan Clark, or else to the other organizations' PR teams. Thanks very much for joining in on the call with us today. And I guess we'll be seeing you again as the guidelines continue to try and guide the aviation response around the world. Thank you very much.